All right, YouTube friends, we are back for another episode of the Teardown, about ready to record. As you can see, Jordan's there in Darlington. I'm here at home. Got a lot to talk about. So, ready, Jordan, get into it?
Nothing to talk about today, Jeff. Nothing to talk about.
Just another one like that. All right. All right, here we go. All right, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Teardown. My name is Jeff Gluck, and I'm along with my coworker, Jordan Bianchi. We are motorsports writers for The Athletic. And today, Jordan is at Darlington Raceway, where he's just thrown it all the way back to, I don't know, last week in terms of excitement, at least, and drama and controversy. Ross Chastain, once again, center of attention. I'm here in Colorado at home. But yeah, another fun race to talk about here, Jordan.
Content king. That's what he is. He's the content king. I mean, I don't know what else you could say. It almost feels like you don't need to start watching a NASCAR race until like the last 30 or 40 laps almost. And because everything else that really happens before that doesn't really matter. It feels like you're going to get a late restart or something of that nature. And there's probably going to be an incident on the racetrack. And that's probably what you're going to be talking about, because this race, for the most part, was not a race that there was a lot going on. And then in the last, 20 laps, 15 laps, whatever it was, that's all anyone's going to be talking about this week.
Yeah, I mean, you were messaging me, as the laps were winding down there. You're like, I don't know what we're going to talk about after this. And then all of a sudden, Ryan Newman has his incident, and cautions breed cautions, cautions breed controversy and drama.
And especially when you've got Ross Chastain in the middle of all this, fighting for the win, and you're like, okay, yeah, this is just, at this point, you just sit back and kick up your legs and be like, give it to me.
Yeah, it's what's he going to do next? What's going to happen? I mean, good or bad? What is going to happen with this guy?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I said this on Twitter at the time, but I mean, you can't turn away. And again, when you think about it, each week I write this column after the race called the Top 5 column, right? And I've tried to section it off this year. And the second item each week is main character. We all see online that somebody has like the main character syndrome or whatever, where like they're the center of the story, no matter what happens, right? And no matter who was going to win this race today, it became obvious in the, that by the final laps, the main character once again was going to be Ross Chastain. He gets into it with Truex, although that seemed like it was Truex's fault from my view. At the end of the stage when they're racing hard, Kyle Busch's team is telling him, when they're going to race hard on a restart, because Kyle Busch was pissed at him for whatever again, and they're saying, hey, don't let him drag you into something here. Don't let him, get you on this. And then Kyle Busch basically ends up getting himself in the wall while trying to chase Chastain. Again, and Larson, I mean, they had 2 restarts earlier, or, at least in terms of the Larson Chastain part of it. Chastain did his thing where he leaves exactly 1 lane, right? And no more, which is what Noah Gragson was so pissed about at Kansas, right?
Which is what he should do, by the way.
That's racing extremely hard, right? So
for the win in the closing laps.
Sure. So the next time, a couple restarts later, because that first one wasn't, necessarily for the win or in the closing laps, but so he's, Ross comes on the radio and says, all right, so, what do we think is the 5 is probably going to try to take revenge here, and do the same thing to me in turn 2, which he did. Larson put him in the wall the next time, kind of brushed him into the wall. So then, then the caution comes out again, and, they've got this incident where it's like, okay, it turned out Ross was viewed as the race leader, barely ahead of Larson. So he's getting to pick that lane choice. Okay. So he's like, okay, well, I'm going to take bottom, because if I give Larson the bottom, he's going to do the same thing. Larson knows, okay, Ross is going to try to come up. He's probably going to try to squeeze me. He's going to leave me very, 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 very little room. Like, he might not make contact, but he's going to leave me very little room. So they go down in there. Larson knows that. Ross knows that. And I think Ross just made a little bit too much of a mistake there. Got into Larson. Larson's so mad that he stays in the gas, plowing after they wreck, driving Ross all the way down the front stretch or into the turn. You could hear on the rec as I had Ross's radio on, Brandon McReynolds is going, still pushing you, still pushing you, still pushing you, still pushing you. I mean, Larson was just pissed and just.
Oh yeah, his crew chief might have been pissed even more. By the way.
Yeah.
Cliff Daniels.
So look, but was anybody surprised? Absolutely not. Like nobody was surprised that an incident happened right there with Ross and Larson. I mean, we are going to. Ross is the center of the universe right now. Like in terms of the NASCAR world, all roads go through Ross. It was the same thing last year, and so he is the main character these days. He hasn't won, for somebody that hasn't won a race in over a year, to have this prominent of a role is pretty astounding. But at the same time, he's the points leader. He's in contention seemingly every week. He's getting involved in something every week. Again, we sometimes not his fault. Sometimes it is his fault. It seems more often than not, he has something to do with it. But we are all talking about him right now. And it doesn't seem like it's going to be stopping anytime soon. Don't you think?
No, it's funny because just this week, Kyle Larson on his podcast said, pretty nice things about Ross Chastain. He's basically the most popular driver. He hasn't really had an issue with them and, nice things. And then this week it's like, oh, check that one off. There's another guy that's mad at, Ross. It's like the list of guys who are probably mad at Ross versus the guys who aren't mad at Ross is probably skewed quite heavily one direction. And it's just interesting to watch this kind of unfold. And it's interesting because Rick Hendrick was in the press conference afterwards, and he was asked, what do you think about this? And he's like, Ross needs to change, and that he can't continue to race this way, and that you can't win a championship this way. I said again, I'll say it again, like, I think he can. Like, he's doing it. He's doing this for the last year and a half. He almost won the championship last year racing this way. Like, unless somebody's going to go out there and deliberately wreck him just to wreck him, then maybe. But you do that, then you open up a box on what penalties you bring from NASCAR, and I don't know if that's something that everyone's really willing to accept. And this is working for Ross. I can't tell you this enough. Like, it is working. Like, yeah, he didn't win the race today. He hasn't won a race in over a year, but he's almost won a lot of races. He's the points leader. He's got a great average finish. He's winning stages and all of these things. Like, he's doing the things he needs to do to put himself in championship contention. And, maybe there's a price to be paid later at some point, but Joey Logano was a guy who had a similar rap sheet at one time as Ross Chastain did, and Martin Truex Jr. at Martinsville, and Martin swore vengeance on him and it wasn't going to win the damn war. What happened? Logano won the championship. So I just think that to say that you can't win a championship this way, I don't think is accurate.
You talk about working for him. I mean, this guy got on the Pat McAfee show this week. I mean, that's NASCAR's dream, right? To have their drivers on that show in particular, and to get in front of that sort of mainstream sports audience. Like, this is a guy that he's getting people to talk. Like, we've been talking about NASCAR needs, sort of some juice. They need a driver that's going to get people talking. They've got it. They've got it right now.
They got one.
Yeah. I mean, and more and more people are learning about him. It's just, again, it's like every week. And I think that is what, if you're NASCAR, right, you don't really care either way. You don't need to have a stance on what he's doing. All you know is that he's getting people to talk, right? And so for you as a series, if you're trying to build your narrative from week to week to week, sort of the old soap opera on wheels that we used to talk about, but it hasn't really been as much of a thing the last few years or even decade in some cases. But
Ross is throwing it back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you are tuning in every week and you're like, what now? What's he going to do now? You don't know.
You don't know. Who's going to be mad at him this week?
He could have won this week. I mean, and still, like, and you get it from the standpoint of the competitors that are frustrated with him. I mean, Cliff Daniels saying on the radio, he's taken us out of 3 races now, Chevy, because you talk about, okay, this race, Larson could have won. If Larson gets raced cleanly there, in theory. Maybe he beats Chastain off the top side. Whoever wins that battle, if that's a clean battle, and there's no more cautions, they're probably going to drive away, and that's the end of the race. Okay, so that's potentially one win for Larson. Dover, Larson was, he hadn't established himself yet. It was pretty early in the race, but he was coming pretty fast. He looked like he had a pretty fast car, and obviously the Brendan Poole incident happens, goes up, takes out Larson. That again, you feel frustrated if you're Larson and his team for that. I don't know if you want to count the Talladega type situation, but I don't know. I assume that's the third race, maybe that they're talking about.
I would think so, yeah.
So that's a super speedway race, but still they're like, hey, like what the heck? So it's I get it from their standpoint. I get Rick Hendrick saying, hey, this guy's too aggressive. But look, from the same standpoint, if you're Chastain, you haven't won in over a year. You're going in there. You have a chance to clear Larson. If you're able to hold it there and pinch him a little bit and cut off his line and drive away, you just won at Darlington. You're in the playoffs. You increase your points lead. You get a lot of people off your back saying, "Hey, look, I won." So yeah, it didn't work out for him. A mistake. And here's the thing too. I think people have pointed this on Twitter. So first of all, I don't think some people on Twitter are feeling like, oh, he does this intentionally. He's wrecking. I completely reject that. Why would he in that situation, racing for the win, say, oh, I'm going to go physically wreck somebody to try to pass them for the win at that point? No, he's trying to race them super, super, super hard, and he's overstepping the line and making a mistake. Yeah. Is that fair assessment in your mind?
I 100% agree with that. I think he has like almost a miscalculation of how far he can go, and it's a little too far. And it's not like he's deliberately turning people and running into people. I don't even think the Brendan Poole thing at Dover was him intentionally turning the 15 car. It was much like Hamlin at Richmond. He just misjudged it with the closing speed and got into him. This is just a driver who is naturally aggressive and goes forward. And he more often than not, just puts himself in bad spots because of that aggressiveness. This isn't somebody who goes out and looks for trouble. It's just kind of like you put yourself in that position, trouble is going to find you. And that's more often than not what happens.
And so, there's a line, I think there's a distinct difference there, right? It's not somebody going out and saying, I'm going to wreck the field. It's somebody who's making mistakes. Now, then you can argue, okay, well, you're making a little bit too many mistakes now because of your aggressiveness. Maybe you're overstepping, and this is why people are mad at you. Larry Mack said that he was watching the data. He says this on FS1 afterwards and on the post-race show, and where he could see that William Byron lifted a little bit on that restart to get his car set and drive off the corner. He noticed that Chastain floored, never lifted, never comes off the gas on that restart with Larson. And, he gets tight and wrecks himself and Larson. You tried to go talk to Larson afterwards. Sounds like no dice, so we don't know how he feels about that.
No, I mean, it was pretty obvious he was mad. I mean, he was walking down pit road and he had a expression on his face that looked like he was pissed, like understandably. And he declined. He just shook his head no. Tried to talk to Cliff Daniels. Cliff didn't want to talk about it either. And I get it. Like, and you look even beyond Larson, like these incidents with Chastain from Larson's perspective, it's like Denny Hamlin last week. I mean, we're talking 3-4 races this year where they probably should have won, and they didn't. And it's, that's frustrating. And I guess the good thing is that you continually put yourself in these situations to possibly win races, but you're letting them get away. And that can end up costing you in the big picture.
Sure. Right. I mean, you take, like your point, going back to Kansas, for instance, right? Which I think that was hard racing with the Hamlin thing, but let's say it goes Larson's way, 5 more playoff points right there. Let's say today goes Larson's way, 5 more playoff points right there. Let's say Dover, he ends up winning, we don't know what happened potentially. So you can even take just a couple of these.
Yeah.
10 more playoff points right there. I mean, this is, and also you're moving higher up in the standings when you're not getting wrecked.
You've got a chance to win the regular season championship.
Yep. Yeah, because he leaves today finishing 20th. So you're giving away lots and lots and lots of points. And we know that these are the kind of situations that can come back in the playoffs as well. You can be running great in the playoffs, but you have one bad race and you could have used those playoff points.
Mhm.
So it's more than just, man, I would have liked to win that race. We are costing ourselves, is this going to hurt us in a championship run? So yeah, I totally get the frustration from everybody. I just think that, look, this is, he's not going to change. We're not going to see Ross Chastain change how he races. So do you want to adapt and deal with it? Or, and I don't know how you do that, but I mean, it's fascinating to me to hear when you hear Kyle Busch, a veteran guy who's been around being coached up. Hey, don't let this guy draw you into doing something stupid, run your race, let him do his thing. I mean, to have to remind Ross is in everybody's heads. Right now.
100%. 100%. I was gonna make this point. Like, I mean, that's a great point, and that's a great example of he is a guy, two-time champion who should be above all of this, and he's thinking about this. Kyle Larson, who is arguably the greatest race car driver in North America and one of the world, is consumed with this, and to some degree where it's like he's thinking about this probably on restarts, and his crew chief is obviously thinking about it. And this is Denny Hamlin. I mean, the list goes on, and you could probably throw Truex on that list of guys that are always thinking about what is Ross going to do here? Is Ross going to mess me up, or how is Ross going to hurt me here? And it's like, you start doing that, you end up hurting yourself, and Ross doesn't hurt you. It's like this is Ross's world, and everyone's living in it right now.
Exactly. I mean, again, all roads run through Ross, and it's, William Byron in his post-race press conference, he got a couple questions about, well, what were you thinking on these restarts with these guys in front of you? Or are you thinking, that last restart, are you thinking, that, or not the last restart, but, because that was the one with Harvick and Byron, but the second to last one where they wrecked, what's your strategy there? And he said, yeah, we talked about it. We talked about what's going to happen here. What is the scenario that's going to play out? So, he's just like, okay, yeah, there's a very good chance that Ross might get into it with Larson. Probably going to try to run him high at the very least. So if I kind of stay low as possible, I mean, so even the other drivers in the field are having to calculate what Ross is going to do. And that's just I think it's a very different dynamic than we've seen, because so many different people feel affected or impacted by one driver's sort of actions, because he brings something so different. It's just fascinating to watch. Again, I think, we're sort of in the same boat as like a NASCAR would be, right? Where we're neutral on what happens. We don't care because we're covering this, right? So we're not saying, oh, this just shouldn't happen. We're just sitting back and seeing what's going to happen. And it just keeps you so interested. I mean, it's just so intriguing, because these situations don't come along even every few years where, I mean, I think you could argue that Keselowski's early days, again, were probably similar to this. Maybe some of Kyle Busch's stuff at times, maybe Logano early days, raw Logano.
There was a stretch there between, like, it was like a Penske versus Gibbs war, where you had Logano and Keselowski versus, really it was Hamlin, Kyle Busch, and Denny Hamlin. And you had all of that going on, and there was and that extended over a 2-3 year stretch, and obviously culminated with what happened at Martinsville. And it was like, and then you had Keselowski jumping, or Kenseth jumping Keselowski at Charlotte, and you had all of that. It's just like, that was always kind of there for a while. And so that's the thing I would compare it to the most. And for me, president of Team Chaos, this is fast. This is great. This is awesome. We're loving this. Gives us something to talk about every week, and people are interested, and like, bring it on.
Larson's point on his podcast, maybe he feels differently now, was, he feels like that Ross is owning it. And Larson was like, hey, I kind of love it, and that he thinks that would resonate with people who are watching it. And, Nando DeFino is our fantasy sports / betting editor here at The Athletic. And we do a preview piece with him every week where he asks us questions about the race. And he, so he's sort of the casual NASCAR fan, right? Who has, he's gotten into it based on what we're telling him and what our answers are each week. So, he's tried to learn enough about NASCAR to, know enough to ask us the questions, but also he's very new to the sport, and he's so fascinated by Chastain. Like, what is going on with this guy? Like, and again, so I think that draws in sort of the casual fan. That's something that NASCAR can market. Again, like, I get if you're a fan of a different driver and you don't like how he races and you're tired of this guy, okay, sure, you're absolutely. But other people love it. Oh, he's going to be so aggressive and he's not going to cut anybody any slack, and he's just going to take they love that too. Maybe, if you're more of a Chastain fan, but either way, it's getting harder and harder for people to feel any sort of middle ground about this guy. You're starting to feel very one or the other. And so, that's, again, I feel like that's good. That's good for NASCAR. So just fascinating.
Sports are better when you've got villains, when you've got people to root against. And Ross is that villain. And maybe it's not a role he wants, but it's the role he's put himself in, and he is owning it to some degree. You can see, I think last week was a telltale sign of he wasn't as apologetic for the Noah stuff. He was like, I put him in a one-lane spot, and I'm not, that's what my job is, and I'm not going to apologize for that. And he owned it afterwards, and he's owned it since. And, he apologized today, but I think he'll say, like, I'm going to be aggressive and go for the win. I'm not going to change what it is. And I think there's going to be,
I don't really think he apologized today, to be honest.
I didn't hear, I'll fully admit too, like, full disclosure, I didn't hear the interview. What I heard was that he, did apologize or said I messed up or whatever.
Well, so, yeah, I mean, I think
maybe it wasn't an apology. It was more of a, hey, yeah, that's my fault.
He said I was trying to squeeze him and I didn't mean to turn myself across his nose and wreck myself. But he didn't say anything like, hey, I'm really sorry to the 5 team and to Kyle Larson for that. No, nothing. No, just like, yeah, I didn't mean to do that. He's like, I was definitely trying to squeeze him and put him in a terrible situation, essentially, though.
Yeah.
But that's what Larson expected. I think that's what everybody would expect at this point from Ross. So, this guy, I'm not totally buying all the straight up Dale Earnhardt Sr. comparisons, the intimidator type stuff, but I can see where it would be tempting to draw some of that.
Blue collar.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the other part of this too. It's like the guy is not like some entitled brat or something who has just bought his ride and is driving over his head and not caring about his equipment or whatever and just wrecking people or whatever. Like,
and he's not making these bombastic comments and calling people out in the media or things like that. Like, he gets out of the race car and he just kind of like,
Yeah, well, I mean, look, he's probably about as everyman as you could possibly get, like in terms of the grinder who truly had his work his way up, and we've talked. He's so down to earth, like because he doesn't have sort of that air or that sense of entitlement. He's a very different personality for sort of a star NASCAR driver in a way, but there's a big contrast there. It's not totally unlike Joey Logano, although they're very different personalities, but where, Joey Logano was super, super hard racer, and then he's so happy-go-lucky off the track. Ross is not like some happy-go-lucky, smiley guy necessarily, but he's like the gritty watermelon farmer, paid his dues and everything off the track, and we'll do like the most weird sort of humble things that you're like, dude, you don't need to do that. Like, you're a cup driver. Like, but then again, on the track, he just is so polarizing. So just, and again, this is not going to be the last time. I mean, we're halfway through the regular season now, and we're going to be talking about him for a while to come. So this is not like, just like Kansas wasn't or whatever. I mean, it's not like this is the last time where we're just gonna be like, oh, that was that story, and now everybody will move on. And we haven't heard from Ross Chastain in a while. Nope. I mean, All-Star race next week is going to be a great time for people.
That was what I was just going to say. It's like, you look at this. What's next week, Jeff? Short track, old school short track race. It's going to be fun to watch. And I will say this: he's racing one of the 2 grassroots series late model races at North Wilkesboro this week. Which, by the way, those races are filled with various Cup drivers. Now, I don't think off the top of my head there's guys in those races that are too upset with him, but you never know. And so I think next week's All-Star race is going to be fascinating to see how he gets treated. And I think there's the opportunity there. And you got to remember, small field, it's just going to be all the guys like Truex, Hamlin, Bell. Help me out here. Basically the All-Star race field is filled with guys who are like all against him. So it's like there's going to be nowhere for him to hide in this short track with a very select field of guys that are pissed off at him.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be, do you dare use some of your retaliation on an exhibition race? Or you've stated that you didn't think that the Denny Ross thing from the Clash was worth retaliating for because that was an exhibition race. So if you use if you wreck him or something, and then is that going to be able to carry over to a points race? You don't think so?
No, I'll tell you this. I think there's guys now on this list who don't care. They don't care. It's not really eye for an eye. It's no, he got me once, I'm going to get him 3 times. It's like we want to make his life hell, and it's not just going to be a 1-week thing. It's going to be a multi-week thing.
Is there any sort of thought that might go through his head? Like, so this is what made me think of it. He's getting ready for a late race restart, and he's saying to his team, okay, so the first time he says, okay, so do we think that, I think that Larson's probably going to get revenge on me in turn 2 from the previous thing. And then they're trying to figure out which lane to pick as he's the leader. And he's like, so do we think this is over? Like, is he going to view this as we're even now or not? In some ways, wouldn't it be easier to not have to worry about that? Like, and again, I'm oversimplifying it probably, but he has a fast car. He has a really, really fast car. What kind of position would you be in if you are not putting yourself in these spots? Like,
yeah,
is that a reasonable thing, or is that just going to completely ruin how he races?
No, I mean, the flip side of this, and I don't think it gets talked about a lot, is we talk about drivers, we talk about Larson leaving points on the table and potential wins, right? Chastain has an even lengthier list of wins that he should have had and points that he's thrown away than probably anybody else. I mean, you look at the number of laps led, you look at the finishes. His finishes this year has been up and down, but he gets stage points like crazy, and that's really been helping him keep him up in the standings. Like he hasn't won. I mean, it can't be stated enough. He hasn't won a race in over a year. And you go back to last year, right? There's 5, 6, 7 races since Talladega last spring that he should have won. And this is just over and over again. And you wonder, Hendrick has got a long history of building fast race cars. Like, come on, they're going to be in, they may have like a down year, but they're going to be in the contention year after year. Same with Gibbs, same with Penske. Like they have a lengthy track record, right? Trackhouse does not have that track record. Like they have obviously found something, and what they have built is incredible, and they're doing it for the last year and a half. But that's only a year and a half. There's no guarantees, or I would say not a confidence, but there's not the same level of confidence that you would have in other organizations that they're going to be here in 24 and 25. So you kind of wonder, like, hey, are you going to have the opportunity down the road? I thought William Byron, I kind of asked that question of William Byron today about wins and everything. And he's like, we put ourselves in position and it kind of comes around, so to speak, right? Like, you don't know if Chastain's going to be able to do that because we don't know about Trackhouse.
You're right. I mean, yeah, I think it's fair to wonder, like, are they in a sense sort of letting some great golden opportunities go by where, yeah, again, they haven't been around long enough, and we certainly can't say, well, they're just going to be this strong forever. I mean, it's a great point that you make. So are we going to look back in 3 years and go, man, they really should have won more when they had the chance with those fast cars? They had fast cars every week and they weren't winning. Like, wow, what a missed opportunity. That's very possible. Look, the organization seems to be, doing great and on the upswing. But we've seen this over and over again with even yeah, go ahead.
I was just because, it reminds me, I don't mean to cut you off, I apologize. It reminds me a little bit of the Everham cars back in the day, right? Like Casey Kane won 6 races and it felt like, oh my goodness, Ray worked his magic again. This is going to be the second coming of Hendrick. And then the next year they didn't win any races. And then from there they were kind of up and down, and they never really were able to recapture that 6-win season again. Like, you call it lightning in a bottle, whatever you want. Trackhouse is doing it, but they're only doing it for a year and a half, and so you just don't know. This is what it reminds me of.
Yeah. No, I think that's very fair. Nobody stays on top in NASCAR for that long. I mean, we've seen Hendrick have their down years, Gibbs. So, it's a great point that you raised. And we'll have to see. Only time will tell with that. So we made it like about 30 minutes into this podcast, and we haven't really hardly talked about the winner, William Byron.
It doesn't matter. It's Ross, baby. It's the Ross podcast.
William Byron, now a series high 3 wins.
Yep.
This is the most he's ever won in a season, and we're only halfway through the regular season. He is bringing fast cars. And what I think is interesting is, here's a guy who had, a 60-point penalty.
Yep.
He's back up now to 5th in the standings. He's only 42 points out. He would easily be the points leader right now.
Yep.
Without that penalty. They've pretty much shaken that off. He's getting his playoff points back. He's getting back in the standings. And again, it seems to be him and Larson, with Elliott as like the third guy. Elliott ends up finishing 3rd today, but Larson would have finished ahead of both them. So Byron is really, it wasn't long ago where it's like, Byron's kind of like the 4th guy in a way, or, like, what's going on with Byron? They just don't seem to have it. Again, there was a couple years ago where Bowman won 3 races in the season and Byron had won 4 races. Okay, so there you go. I mean, so that's why I say people are like, wow, what's Byron? Is he ever going to do anything? I mean, it seems like he's doing something now.
He is. And you go back to last year, and it felt like they had 2 races really early on. Should have been a 3rd here at Darlington this race. And it's not like their performance fell off a cliff. They were really good. They should have won more races. They were in contention to win more races. They just had a lot of self-destructive tendencies, had a lot of mistakes, bad luck, and they just never were able to get back. They still had a very good season, almost made the championship 4, by the way. And it's just, so it's like, you're just kind of waiting though for Byron to take that next step. Like, you felt like, okay, he got that first win, and then he won again the next year at Homestead. And it's like, okay, it's just kind of like a little bit of herky-jerky. And it kind of felt like that last year. Like, you're okay, man, he's got 2 early wins. He's running well. Like, this is his coming out party. Like, we saw Larson do this. We saw Elliott do it. This is Byron's year. And it didn't really happen. But I say it confidently. It does feel like this is Byron's coming out party, where he kind of asserts himself. And they look good. And they look good just about everywhere. And that's the big thing, is they have speed in the race cars. There isn't like one track they're capitalizing on. And this is a really, really young driver who is still very much coming into his own.
What I really like about Byron this year is the maturity is very much on full display. He's very, very calm. Think about the last couple of weeks, right? Like, I mean, you saw a lot of poise today. There was 2 cars ahead of them. They probably weren't going to win. He's planning, okay, this happens. I need to be patient here. But last week, Kansas, right? Like, where they were 3 laps down at one point, and he never panicked. He kept his team in it. He kept himself in it. And they were able to get all those laps back, finish 3rd or whatever it was. And those are the signs of where, because a lot of times we see drivers or teams, like if one mistake, if something spirals down, they get a, pit road speeding penalty, something, and the race is over, the race is ruined. They can't recover from it or whatever. And Byron is keeping himself in it. He's keeping himself in these races. And, he has speed too. So it's an interesting situation. I think that he's going to be a guy where it maybe took him a little bit longer than people would have thought. He came in very young, but he's clearly established now. And there's no doubt that when they get to the 100 greatest drivers list for the 100th anniversary, that he will be on that list, despite not making the cut this time around.
He was touted very high when he came into the Cup Series as like the next great Hendrick driver. And that's a lot of pressure, but he's handled it really well. He doesn't make mistakes. He rarely puts himself in bad positions. You even go back a week ago to Kansas. It's like, yeah, he got into the wall and he got loose. Like, you know what? That's a tough day. That's a tough track. And he still was able to, at your point, and I think you're right. He doesn't compound things. Like he makes a mistake, that's the mistake. It's over with. It's not a spiral. It doesn't keep going sideways for him. And he's able to push it aside. And the team, he's got his handpicked crew chief and Rudy there, and they have a really good rapport. And Rudy is really good at giving William what he needs. And those moments where things can seem like they kind of could bubble over for whatever reason, it's the voice in the ear of helping him keep calm a little bit. And last week's a perfect example. They go multiple laps down. It's like they just keep fighting. And that's a trademark of a team that's how you win championships, is with that kind of fight. And because when you get in the playoff, things are going to go wrong. You're going to find yourself in a spot where you're going to have to rally. And we've seen the great teams do that, whether it's Harvick, whether it's Larson when his season was. That's how you win championships.
I don't think we got a ton of clarity once again on Hendrick versus Gibbs today, because
No.
Larson was maybe going to win. Byron ended up winning, but Truex was the one that led the most laps. I was a little bit surprised Hamlin never got back up there, but he hit the wall early after he went, I think through fluid. So maybe we didn't get the best test there, but Truex looked great. And then they, I don't know if it was, I guess it's his mistake at the end, racing Ross. I don't know why he tried to press it there at the end of the stage, I guess for the win, but.
Oh, and that was a rare moment too for Ross. Like it seemed like he didn't want to pass his teammate. It was kind of getting his teammate a little bit of a break there if he could. And he kind of got out of his rhythm, which is a really hard thing to do here at Darlington. It seems like when you do that, you're going to put yourself in a bad spot. And he kind of did. And it allowed Truex to open the door for Truex, who naturally wanted to take advantage of it. And you kind of wonder if it sounded like Chastain wish he could have done that over. And certainly I think probably Truex would have as well.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I still don't really know, and you still don't really know the order, but definitely seems like getting a group here where you've got Byron, Larson, Truex, I think you can throw in there, Hamlin, Chastain, and then what do you do with Elliott?
I need to see more from him. Like he's not leading laps. He's not running up front. He's not in the mix for wins. You look at the finishing order today and you're like, oh no, he finished well. Like that was through attrition. That was just kind of picking your way through a lot of things. He was going to maybe leave with a top 10 finish, but that was not. You look at where the 24 and the 5 and how they're running and what they're doing on a weekly basis, leading laps, winning stages, putting themselves in position to win races and winning races. Elliott's not doing that. Now, Elliott's getting what he can out of his car, but they just don't have speed in the race car right now. There is a clear gap between the guys you mentioned, and then I would say, that next group.
Yeah, I mean, you tried to ask him about that this weekend, and he basically got a little bit snippy and basically said, why are you asking me? Look at the scoring monitor.
Yeah.
So in other words, sort of like a we are what we are kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
he's right. I mean, it is what they are. I mean, that is the truth. I mean, that's got to be
that's not good though, because that's
No,
surprising.
It is surprising, and it's really not good because you got two teammates. It's not just Chevrolet guys or whatever. It's two teammates in your house who are going out and doing this, who have multiple wins and are doing all of these things, and you're not. Now, you also miss some races and everything like that, but I don't think that's the reason. Like, just they don't seem like they've got a ton of speed in the race car. You're not hearing Chase. Chase seems fine. He's racing fine. It doesn't seem like it's a Chase Elliott thing per se. It's more of a 9-team thing.
Yeah, very interesting. And again, we don't really have a complete picture because Bowman's been out. Barry is obviously still learning. Barry had a pretty bad day. He was finished 9 laps down today, 30th place. Yeah. So we don't really have a great full picture of what Hendrick's doing to really properly say, okay, this is where Chase stacks up. Once I think, Bowman comes back, but Bowman, I mean, he had a meeting with you and several other reporters today. And I read the transcript of that, and, it's like, it sounds like he's in a lot of pain. I mean, if he is laughing, coughing, if they drop the jack, it's all pain for him. So like, even if they go to a scan, he's getting a scan this week to see if it's healed up, and it's his upper back sort of. So he has mobility, he can walk around, but like, it doesn't sound, I mean, if you get in a wreck or you're getting hit in a race car, that's not good. So I don't know if he's going to be able to come back anytime like super soon and be as good as he wants to be if he's in that much pain.
Yeah, and you got to keep in mind too. I mean, you would think even if he could come back, if you're Hendrick, you're like, listen, is the All-Star race matter? Like, you don't need to be out there. Like, yeah, it's good to come back and kind of work out the kinks, if you will, but like, big picture, let's be smart here. And then you got the 600, which is not an easy race in and of itself. And as he said today, the thing that he's most concerned about is pit stops, is when the car drops off the jack, that's going to hurt his back. And well, when you got a 600-mile race, what do you have more of? Pit stops. So you got to wonder, like, is it advantageous for them to say, hey, maybe we're going to ease our way back here at Gateway? And, who knows? But the longer you wait, the bigger hole you are. Now, I don't know what the point situation is like. I haven't seen it yet today. I will say going in today, like he hasn't dropped as far as I thought, because a lot of other guys, Chase Briscoe, for example, Suarez, have like had their sorted issues, and it feels like guys really haven't been able to capitalize and put him in a bigger points hole. He's still he was going into today in a pretty good spot where you look at it and say, he could still maybe make it on points, and a little bit of a concern if someone below him wins a race or something, but still he's in a decent spot. But you don't want to be out for too long, though, either, because then it's going to be a must-win mentality like his teammate Chase Elliott's in.
Yeah, so the scoring monitor for us, when we see it live and a driver's not in the race, they just leave it blank. So obviously his name's not on here in the live points that we're looking at. So What I see right now is 17th is blank. So I think he's 17th in points. So that's really not that far out of it.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, there could be a chance to still race your way in on points. But I think the thing with the All-Star race is,
you're right, by the way, 17th in points.
Okay. So as Bob noted, NASCAR's not going to let the number 48 car with the Ally sponsorship, which is, obviously important. They're not going to let them into the All-Star race. Josh Berry would have to race his way in if they do. So I'm sure there's, a little bit extra pressure of like, hey, if you come back to the All-Star race, you're in, and your sponsor will be very happy that you're in. If not, your car is going to have to race its way in through the open, and it might miss the All-Star race, which is North Wilkesboro. You don't want to miss that race. I mean, again, you don't want to put your health at risk, but and then if you have come back, you can't say, okay, I came back for that, now I'm going to skip the 600.
Yeah, I'm going to need a waiver for the next week.
Yes, right. So that's
how do you feel about that? How do you feel about NASCAR not allowing the 48 car into the main event?
I think that's the right call. This is the All-Star race for drivers, not the All-Star race for teams. Okay. Because I haven't liked situations before. I think it's happened in like the Sprint Unlimited, at / now Clash or whatever. Like at Daytona, I think it's been situations where hasn't it been like some drivers have retired, and they still, like NASCAR still said, well, that car is still eligible.
It's happened in the All-Star race too.
Yeah. Like Dale Jr. retired or something. Yeah. And then so the next year they put, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like they've said, well, it's the team. We'll make sure your team's in.
Yeah. I mean, when Bill Elliott broke his leg in like the 95 season, he was eligible for
you're going to like 10 precedents ago. If you're talking about 95.
Yeah, I was gonna say they let Harry Gant race his car in the All-Star race. I feel like there's been a more recent example actually of that. But I don't know. Honestly, I don't have an issue. Like, to me, it's a team sport, right? Like the 48 team won that race to be eligible with Bowman, and it's an exhibition race at the grand scheme of things. And it's like, you're not really hurting anybody by allowing him. It's not like putting him in the All-Star race is kicking somebody else out. You're actually, by putting him in the All-Star race, you're actually opening up another spot for someone else. So I'm just like, I don't see the negative in this at all.
Well, I mean, it's not a set. No, I think it's a smaller field, right?
If you don't let him in, it's a smaller field. Yeah. But if you let him in, you let him in, then you're also going to have someone else come in and probably advance from the All-Star, the Open then. And so you probably would have, you see what I'm saying? You'd probably have one additional spot in the main event. Like, who cares? Yeah. Like, is that? Oh,
I see. Well, I think it's better to have a smaller field personally. I like the more exclusive, smaller field where it's like an actual, hard race to be a part of. And it feels like it's a big deal that you're in it. I
But
think the
they earned
smaller
their
the better
way.
for those. No,
They
I
earned their
know, but
way.
I'm saying like I'm
Yeah.
fine not giving the team an invite because I want it to be like I want to look at that and be like, yeah, these are the best people that earned it, not just to get, well, this guy got provisional for this or this guy's team or whatever. Like, no, you know what I'm
Oh, it
saying?
used to be the All-Star race though. The All-Star, and I don't know when they changed it. It used to be like the owner and the driver would qualify. So like when a driver would leave his team, if he won a race with that team, whoever they put in that car, would also be eligible for the
Yeah,
All-Star race.
I don't like that. I don't like all the twisted rules. I just want it to be like, you know, how they used to like try to twist the rules for like the sprint unlimited and stuff to get Danica in.
Oh yeah, don't.
You know,
that's a whole different ball of wax.
like I just hated that stuff.
That's a little egregious. But in this instance, like Alex won that race. He won that race.
Remember that rule, by the way? You know how they did that?
Oh yeah, it was the pole sitters.
Daytona 500 pole sitters also make the thing. Like if you're a past Daytona 500 pole sitter, you can make this race.
Did Earnhardt get in because he was a Daytona 500 winner too, or something?
Well, I don't have a problem as much with, okay, this guy won the Daytona 500 before, so he gets in. But if you won the Daytona 500 pole, you're in this race for life. Like, anyway, we've gone way off track. Listen, there's a couple controversial things that happened in this race that I want to get your take on.
Oh boy.
I asked NASCAR about both of them.
Oh.
So. Okay. So speaking of Chastain, there was one of the restarts versus Larson. I mean, TV talked about it too. It really looked like he might have jumped the restart. And I think his team said something about it too.
Yep. And Daniel said something about it.
NASCAR says they did look at that restart and they ruled it was a legal restart. So there's that one. I guess they reviewed it. I mean, I wish I could go back and watch it right now as we're doing the podcast, but I don't know. I would have to look at it again. But the other one that this one I do have a problem with. So there's a wreck that happens, that big wreck. And they showed the in-cars. Elliott, Harvick, Keselowski.
Yep.
They were like very much in this wreck, like in it. And in fact, NASCAR on their social media, on their Twitter channel, they posted the in-car. I went back and watched it a few times before this podcast to prepare. I mean, Elliott gets in the wreck and like slows down. Like he's having to slow down because he was in a crash.
Yeah.
And then they were all able to maintain their position to the point where Harvick restarts in the top 10 after that. They showed Harvick's in-car on FS1. I mean, he had 2 huge hits and slowed down. So, okay, so the explanation from NASCAR is they go off the previous scoring loop when the caution comes out. We know that. They say that all cars are supposed to live. So like when Bubba Wallace afterwards was saying, yeah, I should have been ahead of some of these guys. Bubba Wallace, Harrison Burton, they did not slow down to NASCAR's judgment, I guess. So it looked like they were ahead and gained those positions when they really didn't. I'm sorry, I just don't view it that way because I feel like it's not like Elliott and Harvick were slowing down because there was a caution. They were slowing down because they were in the caution. They were part of the wreck.
The caution, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
That's not. They weren't like, oh, well, we're slowing down because we're being careful here. They got in a crash. Like
they weren't able to maintain speed, which
right.
is the
and then you see on the in-car, all these other cars go by them as they have crashed. Yeah. But then NASCAR says, well, the previous loop had you here. You're still rolling, so we're going to put you back in your positions. I just don't think that's right. I don't know if you have an opinion on this, but I personally don't think that.
I mean, it seems like it seems like it kind of fluctuates a little bit, right? Like you go back to Daytona last summer and Harvick was in that wreck and his stance was, I was able to maintain my position but he was going so slow that they ended up dying. Now it didn't matter anyway. His car was beyond destroyed, but there was an argument there. It just seems like I don't know, the consistency and how it's applied doesn't always seem as straightforward as it maybe should be.
Yeah, and sorry if you're hearing any lag on the audio here. The Darlington Throwback internet is not necessarily working with Jordan.
It's dial up.
Yeah.
It's
Speaking of
horrible.
which, well, I don't know how
Uh,
to post this podcast next week from North Wilkesboro. Speaking of old school,
oh man,
so
yeah, we may be doing that one for my apartment.
yeah,
Uh,
that might be
actually, yeah,
that may be a Monday podcast. I don't know. We'll see what we
that
can
may
do.
be a Sunday at 2 a.m. at my apartment. We'll pour a stiff drink and do the podcast.
Speaking
But
of
I
which,
don't know.
where are we going
It's
to
gonna be
celebrate your?
North Wilkesboro next week.
Yeah, see, we're already talking over each other.
Birthday?
Yeah, so you said last week that everybody's going to meet you because you said the truck race was at night, and then we got a bunch of tweets saying, well, actually, the truck race is at 1:30, and I guess there's heats at night or something.
Yeah, I screwed up. Yep. Yeah, the heat races are at night. They shouldn't go late. So we need to figure out a spot to make this happen.
Okay, well, what are people supposed to do? Watch our socials or something? We're just going to announce where we are or
I
what we're
guess
doing?
that's the best thing. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought one of my closest friends would plan my birthday party, Joe.
Who do I need to talk to? Who are your close friends?
The guy
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
The guy I'm looking at here.
I'm just kidding.
So you tell me, what are we doing for my birthday? No,
I don't
it's
even
fine.
live there.
No.
You live there. I live in Colorado. What? How am I
You've
supposed to
lived there in
know
Charlotte longer than I
Wilkesboro?
have.
I've never been to Wilkes County and like hung out there. Then like, oh yeah, this I'll tell you what, this is a great place
There's
to live in
nowhere
Wilkes
in North
County.
Wilkesboro.
There's moonshine stills or something.
No,
I don't know what we're supposed to do.
there's got to be somewhere in Statesville or Mooresville we can go.
Wow,
and go back. That's where most
Statesville.
people are staying. It sounds like.
Okay. Wow, that's going to be a heck of a. All right. Anyway, we'll stay tuned, and if we're able to figure something out, that we'll post on our.
Well, the thing of it is
social
too is
media.
we don't know what time we're going to get out of the racetrack. We kind of have to play this by ear because
Why is there
we
supposed to be
don't know what time
traffic
we're
or
gonna
something? I don't think there's going to be a traffic.
It's not even just. I'm not even talking about that. I'm like legit. Well, that is legit. We don't know what the heats are going to bring. We don't know what the heats are going to be like. So I mean, listen. Chastain could be doing something again. Okay, we just don't know. We have to factor in. There's the Chastain factor we have to take into account here. Okay,
We can't just leave it the checkered
we're-
flag of the.
we
Yeah.
can't guarantee that and then there's obviously the traffic too, which is they have a plan. They have a plan. I hope it works.
Hey, look, here's another thing. So I was talking about this with the tweet up for next week with Bob too. So there's no tunnel at North Wilkesboro, so we're going to be trapped in the infield whenever they open and close the gates. So like even if we wanted to leave right at the checkered flag, be like, all right, nothing happened. Let's go. We got to get to Jordan's birthday party. We're gonna be like, we got to wait till they open the gates. By the time they open the gates, we're in the traffic. So
there's no escape. I mean,
can we just have a tailgate in the parking lot with all the other people that are in the traffic, and then
that's actually a really good idea. See, now you're doing what a good friend should do and putting your thinking cap on. That's a really good idea.
well,
I like that idea.
I don't know where we're gonna meet people, but all right. Well, listen, we'll think about it.
Right.
There was a lot of other interesting finishes from today. I mean, you had Harrison Burton got a much needed 6th place finish. Justin Haley, P8. Chris Buescher rallies to P10. Todd Gilliland seemed to be way out earlier, and he finished P11. Good for him.
Another great run for him, by the way.
Keselowski, keeps running well. Harvick, he was up there, but he did have that damage, and that was probably as good as they were going to get. Byron just kind of blasts by on the top side there. So any of those that I just ran through jump out at you or anything?
Couple things. One, Harrison Burton needed that top 10 finish. Like he's had moments where it's like, okay, it looks like Harrison's kind of figuring this out. And then he's had a lot of moments where something will happen to derail that good run. And he needed this in a big way. I'm not saying his ride was in jeopardy or anything, but there's questions about next year with him, right? You don't know. And this is a nice reminder of, hey, I can do this and, keep me in that car. And then Todd Gilliland, like I feel like I'm driving his bandwagon, but I mean, this guy just keeps just knocking out good finishes and doing the things that he needs to do. I don't know if it's going to be at front row. It may be front row. I know they like him a lot, but wherever he ends up next year, they're going to get a really good driver who's talented and in the right situation. I think could do some things.
Here's what's interesting to me. So Todd Gilliland, again, and I know we've been hyping him up, but he is now 1 point behind his very veteran teammate Michael McDowell in the standings. Todd Gilliland ahead of Corey LaJoie in the standings, ahead of Justin Haley in the standings, ahead of Eric Jones, Eric Almirola, AJ Allmendinger. I mean, again, like, and it's not something we expected necessarily. So I think it's worth at least highlighting, like, hey, the guy is making the most out of what he has, despite being a young driver. It feels like anyway. So
yeah.
What else? What else from this race jumped out at you?
I love Darlington. I mean, like, I know the first part of this race, or the first portion of this race, maybe wasn't the most exciting, but it was still Darlington. It still felt good. It was still competitive. It was fun to see tire wear and guys running the wall. And it's just cool to come back here and race. I really do. Like, this is quintessential NASCAR. And I know it sounds hokey or whatever, but this is just a great track.
What did you think of the Larson Nemechek thing? Was that dirty or hard racing?
God, that was hard racing. Come on. Those are two guys racing for the win. Like, I don't know what Larson could have done that. And the only thing Larson could have done in that situation is back off completely. And I don't think that's fair for him to expect him to do that. I know he's not racing for points. I know he's racing a guy who's racing for points, but like, it's reasonable to expect him to race hard and clean, which is what he did. He just raced a little too hard. And he got into the wall and they made contact. Like, I don't know what are you supposed to do there? Like, just back off and say, like, hey, here's the win.
Yeah,
I don't think that's how. I don't think that's how John Nemechek wants to be raced.
Well, and I think too. I mean, look, people spent all week, and you wrote a great story, celebrating the Kurt Busch, Ricky Craven thing. Then you can't turn around and say, "Oh, look, this is like the most legendary finish." Here's a finish that kind of has some of the same elements, but we don't like that. No, absolutely not. He shouldn't have done that. Like, I think John Hunter took it really well, and I give kudos to him for how he sort of handled that in the post race and saying, "Hey, it was hard racing." I also think, from John Hunter's view, that looks good for him, because you just went toe to toe in a super hard battle that took a lot of skill and talent with, like, a driver that a lot of people think is like one of the best in the world, as you said earlier in this podcast. And like, I think John Hunter, he ends up coming out on the wrong end of it, but like, it looked pretty good for him. Like, hey, he can go toe to toe with this guy. Like, that's a nice little resume thing to me. Like,
I agree. Like, I think he's done a really good job of kind of reasserting himself a little bit. Like, you can talk about how he dropped down to the Truck Series, and the first year in the Truck Series, he did a really good job. Year two, maybe not so much, but he has gone to the Xfinity Series and he's doing exactly what he needs to do, which is win races, run up front, and be dominant. And that puts yourself in a conversation to potential future opportunities with good Cup teams. And I think that's exactly what I know that's what he's doing.
All right. I don't know. Is it time for the Was a Good Race poll or no?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, I ended up winning last week because I was a little bit more optimistic than you were about Kansas. Kansas, I mean, it was sort of right in between our guesses, but I barely won. It was very, very close. I think it was less than 1% that I won by. But I mean, Kansas got a great rating. This one, I don't know. I mean, as you said, a lot of this race, I mean, stage 2 had no cautions. Stage 1 was completely dominated by one driver. Are people going to penalize that, or are people just going to be sort of like thrilled by the finish and sort of the craziness at the end? Darlington does usually seem to deliver. So Darlington has a positive, sort of mindset in people's, they have a good image of it. So I think it's going to be in the 80s. I do. It's just where does that land? So I think I might just go maybe with like an 84 here. I'm not sure. I almost feel like that's a little bit low, but that was just my initial take. So 84 for me.
That's much
you think
higher.
I'm being too high? Oh, shoot.
No, shoot. Yeah. I'm actually going to recalculate 9 because I was going to do 70 initially.
Oh, 70.
Yeah, I don't know.
Really?
I just,
oh gosh.
Yeah, I think people are like, oh, this is not.
Well, you're winning the season, so I'm not going to question you whatsoever. So I feel like I'm okay.
I just have a hard time imagining this is going to top over 80. Like, I think I'm going to hedge. I'm going to say 77%.
Okay. 77 for you.
Yep.
84 for me. Now I'm really doubting myself, but we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I think it was a good race. I mean, I was entertained once again.
Fine.
So
Perfectly acceptable.
no, no. I think, see, if it was perfectly acceptable, I would knock it in the 70s or whatever. I think
Oh,
this
see,
was good. I think this was a good race.
I don't
No,
know.
you
I
didn't
mean,
like it?
it was. I mean, Truex kicked everybody's butt in stage one. He had a 5-second lead.
Yeah.
Stage two was okay. It just, I don't know. It just. I mean, well, you talked about the beginning of the show with 30 laps or 40 laps to go, whatever it was. Like we were sitting here having this conversation of like, okay, what are we talking about here? And
Yeah.
so
Well, I'm
when
not
you,
saying there wasn't like a drama
but
storyline
I
in terms of
but I
like,
think that factors into what it was, and
yeah.
so right, and especially coming off a race like Kansas where everybody's like, hell yeah, that's what
Oh,
NASCAR.
sure. Like, I'm not saying this was an epic race
No, no,
like
no.
that,
But I
but
just think
yeah,
there's even be a little bit more of a letdown, and so I think that's
okay.
why. We'll see. I will say I am fascinated to see what this does. I don't think it's going to be lower than. I don't think it's going to be some bad number, but I'm curious to see how people view this because this is also the quintessential. All people are going to be talking about is the race. Are they going to be voting or the finish? Are they going to be voting on the finish? Are they going to be voting on the whole body of work?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. All right. Very interesting. Well, I guess that'll wrap things up then. You don't have anything, or I feel like we're missing something. No? Throwback paint
Uh,
schemes. You like it? You
yeah.
like
Oh
it?
yeah.
You done with them or?
Well, here's a question: are you in favor of Throwback Weekend? There's only one
Oh,
acceptable answer to this. Don't do this. Don't
I
don't.
I feel like there are situations where I really enjoy the throwback weekend. I see some of the paint schemes and I'm like, that's really well done. Or, honoring, taking the chance to honor some of the legends. I think it was a good time to have the NASCAR 75. Um, there's things like that. Then there's times where I'm just like, this is so dumb. What, like, like some paint scheme that's like completely, nobody knows what this is. I'm sure like the team had to go back and like photo archives, like not even anybody on the team knew what it was. They're like thrown back to some random, like, I just, I don't get that. Um, so some of it, you're just like, this is too much, but some of it I enjoy. So I think there's definitely room for a throwback weekend. I don't know. I think the problem is at times there's only so many paint schemes to throw it back to that people know, because
Yeah.
a lot of the older paint schemes were around for a decade or something or more. So when you're trying to throw it back, everybody's already thrown back to that paint scheme multiple times, and some people are throwing it back multiple times in the same race on the same weekend. You're just like, all right, yeah, we don't need like 5 of this one car or something. But yeah, I mean, I like it. People seem to enjoy it. So I do think, again, like I kind of wish it had been on the Southern 500, but if you're not going to do that, I think the All-Star race would have been the All-Star race would have been a perfect throwback weekend this year with North Wilkesboro.
Yeah.
But of course, I'm sure NASCAR is not just going to give up what is there under their umbrella to
Yeah.
SMI and just be like, here you guys go. We didn't need
Well,
Darlington.
yeah. I will also say this too. If I'm a sponsor, that All-Star race is probably going to have a little bit more attention than this Darlington race. I'm maybe a little bit less inclined to say, yeah, I'm willing to kind of forego my usual customary colors to go with this paint scheme. So I agree. I think this weekend is the right week. I mean, perfect world Southern 500 is it, but with the playoffs starting there, it's just not going to happen. I do think it's a cool thing here, and I think they do a really good job of honoring everybody. So
I
I
mean,
like
but
it.
like, what do you think of like when you see RCR says, okay, and they did it as sort of, at least their
I
announcement
thought
was
that
sort
was
of,
funny. That made me chuckle. Like,
but ultimately they're like, hey, we
yeah,
don't have a throwback.
yeah,
We're not going to do that. We're not participating.
yeah. All right, but
We're going to throw it back to
and that's
February.
fine. Like, but and
Okay.
that's to each their own. Like, do I wish they would have? Absolutely, because I think that team is, I mean, a historical team, right? If anybody has schemes to go through and pick from, it's them. But the fact that the vast majority of the garage, I think there was only like 6, 7, somewhere like that, cars didn't do it. Like, I think it's cool. I think it's cool they embrace, and like this is kind of a little bit of a role reversal here. Like, I think it's cool. Like, you got like a guy like Corey LaJoy who's throwing it back to his grandfather, the paint scheme that nobody really knows.
No, I think that was cool. I thought that was cool. That was
But no
neat.
one knows it. I mean,
Yeah, but if it's a
yeah.
family thing,
So I like it. I think it's a cool thing. It's a once a time thing, and I will say it helps give this race an identity that it doesn't otherwise have. Like otherwise, it's just, oh, you're going to Darlington this spring, which is fine. Darlington's great, wonderful, but at least it gives us something like you can start. Oh, that's the throwback weekend. Yeah, that's cool.
So are you
I
off the
like that.
train that Darlington doesn't need 2 races? You think Darlington does need 2 races?
Uh, no, I mean, honestly, if we're being honest, like in a perfect world, like Darlington's one race for me. Like you make this one race, it's kind of like golf, right? Like you go to Augusta once a year and you're like, oh, that's the match. It's special. And again, it's cheesy, but you're like, oh man, we go to Darlington for the Southern 500 every Labor Day. That's our one chance. And it's like, that's it. And I will say it heightens it too, because then if you're a driver and a team, you're like, we want to win at Darlington. We only get one crack at it. Like, and I think that adds even more importance to a race that is already a major. So I also think it helps with attendance and everything else. And so, yeah, I am, as much as I like Darlington, there aren't many. I'll say this, even as much as I like Kansas, and Kansas is great right now. Like I think Kansas is a one date track. I really do. I think most tracks, with the exception of Martinsville, Bristol, Daytona, Talladega, maybe one or two others that I'm leaving out, are everything else is one date.
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, you find enough markets to go to that you spread it out.
Yeah.
And also it's, it sort of hits home, being out on this island here in Colorado, right? Again, like Kansas Speedway, I guess is 8.5 hour drive or whatever it is from here. And that's the nearest track, right? So, you're experiencing this throughout these last 3 weeks, right? You've got Darlington, which is probably what, an hour and a half from your apartment.
Yep.
North Wilkesboro next week is going to be
Hour and a half.
And then the next week after that's Charlotte. So
12 minutes.
3 weeks in a row, it's within an hour and a half radius of Charlotte. Where again, out here, big city, big sports town, we got nothing, right? Pacific Northwest, they got an Xfinity race. Okay, I guess that's something. But there's a lot of areas of the country where you'd be like, dang, can we get one?
Sure.
So when you're dipping into these markets, and it's not like these 3 races that you're around the Charlotte area, the only races this year. I mean, you've got, like you said, 2 Darlington races, 2 Martinsville races, 2 Charlotte races, 2 Bristol races. Richmond is drivable. Atlanta's drivable. They're both 4 hours or 4.5 hours, whatever it is. It's just a lot. It's just a lot. And I get that's the traditional area, but it would be nice to, again, in an ideal world, and that's
spread it out.
Yeah, but then you're probably looking at more street courses or stuff like that. That's because, again, where are you going to, Dustin Long wrote an article last week on NBCSports.com about in his Friday 5 about, hey, like what if they raced around the Broncos stadium parking lot like they did for the Dolphins? But it's not doable here in Denver. Like, I mean, it's just not. There's not enough space for it. So, yeah, like where do you go? They've gotten rid of Pikes Peak, and that's far anyway. So again, it's do you want a bunch of street races? That's how you really spread it out. I don't want that. So therefore,
you want stadium races? I mean, that's the other.
No, I don't think. No, I think.
Yeah. So you're kind of.
So that's why you're going to multiple. That's why you're going to Kansas twice. That's going to Darlington twice. It's almost like those are placeholders for someday to be able to say, all right, oh, look at this new option that we figured out, or this new track, or we've revitalized this, or we're going to go to Iowa now, or whatever it is.
Bring back Iowa, by the way.
Yeah, I've never been there, so I can't speak to that. But
great track. I mean, amenities need some work, but again, at this point, it doesn't matter as much. Like, you want to talk about a track that deserves a date and is under a NASCAR umbrella. And that checks the box, by the way, of a market that deserves it. And you could easily shift a Kansas race there, and then all of a sudden, guess what? One more short track on the schedule, and I think that it's just there's all sorts of things you can do. It's gonna be interesting to see, but goes back to the discussion we had. Like, you're not building new racetracks. You really aren't. Like, and so how do you go into these markets if you're not building new racetracks? Like, you've got to find new and inventive ways, which is street courses or stadium shows. And I don't know. I don't think there's going to be an appetite for street courses too much. I think you can maybe get away with one a year. Stadium courses or stadium tracks they're challenging. So it's going to be interesting to see what you do. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
All right. Well, we'll talk about this more at Jordan's birthday party.
Yes, can't wait. I'm not a guy. I
Whenever-
hate my birthday. I don't even like celebrating, but I get to hang out with you, so I'm excited.
What about our listeners? I thought you were going to be excited about hanging out with our listeners.
I will be shocked if anybody actually wants to hang out with us.
Oh, please. They're all going to be, bringing their sport coats and trying to dress fancy like you will and all that stuff. So, all right. Well, listen, everybody, thanks so much, of course, for tuning in. Hopefully we didn't just ramble this one away, but
we always do.
we always do. All right. Everybody, thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next time on The Teardown. All right, YouTube friends. We'll stay tuned and we'll see if we can figure out a place to meet up with you guys next week.
It'll be fun.
Come on out.
Yeah.
All right. I need some caffeine too, because that's gonna be probably a late night between the parking and the
Parting.
tailgating or whatever we're doing. So
We need to get an RV.
an RV, that's what we should do.
We should get an RV. What if
They
I can,
let you do RV in the media parking lot?
sure we can. I wonder if they have hookups there even.
Probably not.
All right.
We can rough it. All right.
All right.
See everybody.